Good morning. I've got the unenviable task now of trying to keep you awake for the next 20 minutes because if you're anything like me, you're all probably thinking, where's my next caffeine fix coming from? So hopefully this session will be slightly interactive. So just to give you the heads up, in your seats there are little remote controls and I will be asking questions of you, the audience, so just to keep yourself prepped and ready for that. I'm going to start with a little story, which starts in September 1992. I was an 8-year-old young boy, and I know what you're thinking already. Yes, I am that young. I've just had a hard paper round. The reason I'm going to talk about this story is because it kind of sort of sets the scene for why I work for Icon and what we do. I was part of what you would consider a stereotypical family. I had a father in my family that was the alpha, was the breadwinner, and was a self-employed carpenter, incredibly hardworking man. I had a mum who was a stay-at-home mum who worked very hard to raise me and my two brothers. And in September 1992, we were in the grip of recession. And unfortunately, my father lost his business and our world turned upside down in a moment. My father suffered a mental breakdown and went into the grips of deep depression. At that point, he very much went from the alpha to the back seat. And at that point, my mum stepped in to lead our family forward. And all of a sudden, all of the roles and dynamics changed within our family. Now, the reason I find that as an important story, for me, that really defined what I felt was important about teamwork, because our family as a team all of a sudden changed the dynamic of how they work, and we all stepped in to take some of the pressure from my dad. That included losing our house, having to move around, trying to find money to make ends meet, and then also silly little things like me as an 8-year-old child having to learn how to do the washing to take a bit of burden off my mum. So in that moment, I also learned a second lesson, which is something I've carried with me for a very long time, is the importance of education. Without my mum spending the time to educate me and drive me forward and help me understand how to pick up the roles in our family, I would have lost some of those messages, and it's something that, again, that I've carried with me for the rest of my life. The third lesson, which came sometime afterwards, and hence the reason why I work in sport, and as many of you do will have reasons such as this, is that my father still to this day suffers with deep depression and really struggles with that, but actually the magic bullet for him that keeps him level and helps him battle that depression is sport. It is physical activity, and it is something which can have great effects on a human being. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and hence why I work in education, hence why I work in sport. So hopefully today I'm going to question you as the audience to ask some of the manifesto items or part of the strategy items which perhaps haven't been spoken about by the other panel members. And it's something that was in the strategy items, which is workforce development. We see it as a key part of driving the sector forward, and that collaborative working that has been spoken about many times this morning. And I believe that we, as a team, which we all are, we're all part of the same team, need to work together to drive this forward. And actually, we don't need to rely on strategy items, manifestos to do that. We can just get on and do it, but we do have to work together to achieve that. So hopefully, I'll talk about that and you'll be engaged, but we'll see. So, we all know who this chap is. His quote: "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." It's a really powerful statement for me and something that I really, really believe in. A little bit of education goes a long way, and I hope my story demonstrates how it has an impact on someone. So, as I mentioned, in Sporting Future and Towards an Active Nation, there was key mentions all the way through about workforce development and how we need to tackle that, and how the government, from top down, will support that. Okay. Again, we started looking at this before the general election was called, and some of the happenings that have been going on have slightly changed this, but I'll perhaps talk about a bit more about that in my workshop. But some of the mentions that are in there, they're really important. Sport and physical activity is a people business. And it absolutely is. And that's not just the people that are coming in that are looking for physical activity and sports. It's also about the people that are working with those people to deliver that and making sure it's a quality experience. To underpin this, a clear workforce development strategy is key. We absolutely believe that. A workforce development strategy is about customer service, making sure people receive a good quality service. And lastly, a key mechanism to releasing a sport workforce with the right skills will be via apprenticeships. And that is predominantly what ICON work with, as well as other parts of workforce development strategy. So I'm going to go on to talk about some of these items now. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to question you rather than me give my opinion on it, because I'm interested to see what you think about it. So, sport and physical activity is a people business. Do you agree? We'll find out. So, question 1. Have you participated in the current sector workforce development strategy? Very simple question. A's for yes, B's for no. So we've got some statistics up on the screen now. I find that incredibly important, that actually 72%, which we're going to say this is a representative cross-section of our sector, have not participated in a workforce development strategy. Now, everything that all of you do relies on the people you work with, voluntary or employed, to deliver that. And 72% of the people in the room have not participated in one. Okay, so that's quite an interesting stat. A key mechanism to releasing a sport workforce with the right skills would be via apprenticeships. Question 2. Do you understand how to access government funding to support staffing development? A, yes. B, no. Vote again for me, please. Okay, so we're finding a trend here. We're going to say that it's pretty close to say it's the same 27% that voted last time and that said yes. Okay, interesting. Third question. Have you seen an impact in the last year from a workforce development strategy? I'm getting a feeling I'm going to know where this is going to go. Ooh, slightly different. I'm going to assume that's because less people voted this time. Okay. I'll put a little note at the bottom there. If you are part of that 18%, could you come and find us on our stand in the break periods and talk to us about what you're doing? Because the actual general perception out there is that it's not happening. We know it is because we're doing some of those bits with some of our partners, but we're not shouting about it. So it's almost becoming the forgotten agenda. If you look at our very first discussion this morning with Mike, it wasn't even mentioned. And actually, it's slap bang in the middle of both of those documents. And then this morning, it's not been mentioned necessarily directly, so it's been forgotten about. And we need to change that. As that team that I talked about, And we need to get on and actually do it. Rather than waiting for others to do it, we need to start shouting about how we're doing that. And that's why I encourage you to come and talk to us so that we can actually find a way to move that forward. And if you're interested in it and you haven't started it, come and find us, because we'd love to get this moving. And we think it's actually incredibly important. Ian talked about collaboration earlier on. It won't happen if we do it all on our own. We've got to start working together. So let me demonstrate to you why it's important. The post-16 skills plan, which was conducted by Lord Sainsbury, was released, and there are what is considered 15 education routes, which are the primary education routes that all qualifications moving forward from school all the way through to FE, which is further education, higher education, university, will be underpinned. 15 in there. Let me ask a question to you. What's missing? How does that make you feel? I know I want to shout out, you don't have to, but okay, we're not on there. Sport and physical activity should be number 16 that's on there. If you look at the numbers there, this was conducted back in 2012, so I'm assuming this is going to have moved on significantly since then with the amount of apprenticeships that have been pushed through. 584,000 plus 2.3 million volunteers work in our sector. If we go back and look at the numbers on there, we've got masses of people that work within what we do. And it's not considered an education route. If you speak to people at Department for Education, probably about a year ago, things are starting to change, I will admit. Sport isn't considered a vocation or a career. They don't consider it something that you can go into. Now, there's loads of people in this room that all work in it, so there obviously is, but what we're not doing is working together and shouting about it hard enough to say, actually, we need to be part of this strategy. So it shouldn't be 15 routes, it should be 16. But it's not going to happen without us working together and starting to make a bit more noise about it and starting to get involved with it. So, I'm going to quickly touch these because these are all already been discussed. But since this strategy was released, we've had Brexit, which has put into doubt the European funding, which works with a lot of these programmes. Funding switches for FE and HE, so we've gone from Department of Business and Innovation and Skills to Department for Education, which is a positive sign, but it means that it's all put the agendas backwards. Merging of schools and FE, so there was 2 departments for education and funding, and then the skills funding, that's been merged. As I've mentioned, the release of the Lord Sainsbury report. Apprenticeship reform, which we're all suffering for right now, with the general election being called as well. It's made things incredibly hard to know what the future direction is. Trailblazing standards, which I believe Colin is here today from Simpsborough, who's been working with this and will tell you exactly how hard this has been because of the lack of engagement that we've got and unity on it. Employer apprenticeship levy, which came in at the first of this month to be spent. And then the pausing of funding for small, medium enterprise organisations. And then, as I mentioned, the general election. All of these elements here are all working against that workforce development strategy. So what I'm sort of trying to get across as a message for that is that actually, if we know that some of these risk factors in here are starting to make that strategy harder, do we just need to get on with it and do it rather than waiting for funding and everything else to be there? And can we make that happen? Can we be a team? Can we work harder as a united front to make that happen? And I believe we can. So I've got 2 more questions. After what I've just explained, and my humble opinion, are people concerned about how to access workforce development, access a workforce development in the future? Yes or no? And this could completely torpedo the rest of my talk. Good. That's positive. We've got a majority. Good. Okay. I believe it's important, and quite clearly you do. The 30% of you that aren't that concerned about it, I'm going to think kindly and say you're already part of one, and you were part of the 28% earlier. Or it could be that I need to come and have a chat with you, and actually we can have a discussion about it. But we'll see. Okay. What does a workforce development strategy look like is something that I'm going to put back into to you, just to see what people have got out there at the moment. Our opinion at Icon is that it should be for everyone at every moment, all the time. Okay, no matter what your position, you should always be up for learning. Okay, but how can that be facilitated using some of the funding that's out there? And there is funding out there. Frontline staff development, there's lots of funding in terms of traineeships and apprenticeships. Future leader development in terms of higher education, apprenticeship degrees, student learner loans. There's huge amounts that can be accessed by that. Director training, all the way up to 7, 8 and 9. Again, there are grants out there that can be accessed for your organisation. And then board member non-exec training and development. Again, just because someone's made it onto a board doesn't necessarily mean that they are aware of what they need to do. I think Ian actually picked that point up earlier on to say that actually just because someone's in that position doesn't mean they have all the facts they need to make the decisions they need to make. So we think that training education is important to that. As I said, a true workforce development strategy includes everyone all of the time. As I mentioned, these are the funding pathways that you've got in there. We've kind of doubled up on slides there. Final question. Do you feel you have access to an embedded workforce training and development pathway? So I've just explained to you what I think should be in one and how we think it should work. Ask yourself the question, does your workforce development strategy include everything that I've just mentioned? Numbers have been consistent all day, which is good, because if it hadn't been, it made it really awkward to try and explain that. It's really good. I believe that we can do more on this front, and that we should look to better ourselves all the time through education. Everyone in here is here because you're passionate about what you do. Let's try and give people the skills to expand that so that we've got 4 or 5 times that next year in this room. Not in this room, but let's try and get more people engaged with this agenda, and let's do that through the power of education. Hang on, I've lost a slide there. Bear with me. There we go. Thank you, whoever did that at the back. This is my question to leave you with, to ask you. Is it now time to stop waiting for others to make the changes in our sector? Is it now time to take education as a tool and change our world for the next generation? Can we really afford to let this opportunity slip us by? So all of the factors with government manifestos and strategies, I don't believe are important and relevant. I believe that we all have the power in this room to actually make that change. So I implore you to leave today with a partnership opportunity that you didn't have before you came today. Speak to someone else in the room today, which I hope you would all do anyway, and see if we can work together to actually create a collaborative opportunity. Thank you.